Great. So about a year ago, we began learning Megillat Esther and looking for hints of anti-Semitism. We saw them more as we went along the Megillah, I don't know if we've seen it so much in the last couple of classes. It was more about what happened in general. And we already established that Haman was anti-Semitic. And we talked about whether Achashverosh was anti-Semitic. And now we're coming towards the end of the Megillah. We have, I would say, 2 classes probably left. I prepared all the way to the end of the Megillah, chapter 9 and 10, but there's something I'd like to prepare more for next week. And I will see if I'm going to start the next topic immediately or with a 1-week hiatus. So I have to look at my calendar and I will let you know. Everybody remember what the next topic is?
Yes. Tehillim.
Yep. Tehillim, Psalms, but not just like going Psalms 1 to 150. That feels overwhelming. But we're going to take the Shir Shel Yom, the Psalm of the day. There are 7 of them, 1 for every day of the week. Go through them and learn them. I haven't learned them myself in size, so I'll be interested to know why the rabbis, the sages, chose them specifically. I mean, Shabbat is obvious because in the first pasuk it says Shabbat, but the others are not as obvious. So we're going to learn them. We'll learn them inside. We'll learn commentaries on it. And that I think is interesting. That would be 7 different weeks. And then I would like to add other ones, or maybe we'll intersperse depending on timing. But like there's the Tehillim we're saying now since October 7th, Tehillim 121 and 130. Those are very common Tehillim. And I'm sure there are more at that. And people can also, what?
Also, Chaf, every Monday through Thursday, I attend through the OU a Tehillim class, Tehillim and Chizuk class through the OU, and they always have a guest rabbi who gives a Dvar Torah, and they say 5 Pirkei Tehillim: Chaf, Chaf Gimel, Kuf, Chaf Aleph, Kuf Lamed, and Kuf Mem Beis.
Okay, great. You can write them to me in an email. I think it's a great idea to do also 23. Mizmor LeDavid, which we sing on Shabbat, Mizmor LeDavid, but it's also said at funerals.
Right.
And I think that would be great. I like that idea that we would learn it in depth so that it's more meaningful to us when we sing it or when we hear it. So great. So I'm going to be making a list of all the Tehillim that I'd like to get through. I hope I'll get through all of them by June, but I'm going to set that up. So I'm excited, as you know, but I really only want to do the Tehillim that we say more often, because I think those are the ones, random Tehillim are great, but I like the idea of giving depth and meaning to those that we either say or hear more commonly. All right. And with that, we are going to start chapter 9 of the Megillah. Now, does everybody have a copy of the Megillah, Hebrew or English or both?
Yes.
It's good to bring one if you have one. Do you have one, Estelle? Do you have a Tanakh?
I have one someplace.
A Tanakh, a whole Bible. Do you have that?
Yeah, I do.
So I'll give you a minute. I'm not going to do anything while you go look. Or a Chumash usually has in the back of Shemot. Is that true?
While we're waiting, can I tell you, you
Shemot,
you gave me homework.
Great, that's perfect fill-in. What was your homework, Elaine? Remind us.
It says why we wear costumes.
Oh, why we wear costumes on firm. Perfect. Thank you. Go for it.
Yeah, it's related to Mardi Gras, which
What? I did not expect to hear that. When did Mardi Gras start?
I don't know, but it says at the end of the 15th century, among Italian Jews, they started the custom of dressing up, and Purim tends to coincide with Mardi Gras on the calendar. And
where is Mardi Gras celebrated? I thought it was in South America.
Or South, it's also
before I guess it's the last, chance to have fun before Lent, before the penitential season.
Oh, got it. Yep.
Wow. So, to act up,
Nice. To be more frivolous.
Yeah. Upside down. Yeah. And
upside down, and we will turn it over, which is in this chapter.
Yeah, and Esther hid her identity from the king until she needed to reveal it. So it's kind of like a masquerade.
Beautiful. Wow. I learned something new. I never knew that. And that is awesome. Where did you find that? If I may ask.
I just looked around the internet.
Amazing, amazing, amazing. Also, we learned last chapter, remember that kol ameha or harov or something, many
Excuse me,
ameh,
but I can't, where is,
chapter 9.
I-
Oh, where is that? Where are the, in a Tanakh, Estelle?
yeah, I have it. I mean, I have the Tanakh here, but
So you need to look towards the end of the book for the Megillot. Towards the end, not at the end, but towards the end.
oh dear.
Keep looking while we're
Is
talking.
it before Job? Or what,
Ooh, that's a great
Proverbs?
question. It's after that, I think.
It's after Proverbs?
I believe so, yeah. Yeah, because after Proverbs is Job. I know because I'm doing 929, the chapter a day, and we're doing Job after Proverbs. By the way, I found Proverbs really hard. I don't know if I would ever teach that. I found it a little boring, very repetitive and hard. But other than that, it was great. Are you getting closer? See any of the Megillot, Estelle?
I have Shir HaShirim.
Okay, good. You'll find it now. It's in that area. It's the 5 Megillot are together. So what I was saying is that last time, remember, we said that a lot of Amei Haaretz, a lot of the people of the land, mityahadim. So you could say that means they became Jewish, but it could also mean that they dressed up and looked like they were Jewish. Everybody remember that? We learned that last time. That's how Elaine asked the question. Well, where do costumes come from? Okay. I mean, there are other sources, by the way. When we sing Shoshanat Yaakov, we didn't learn Shoshanat Yaakov. Ooh, maybe we should learn that before we finish. That might be nice. So Shoshanat Yaakov is a song. Did you find it, Estelle?
Just found it, Esther.
Perfect. Go to chapter 9. So Shoshanat Yaakov, I know many tunes to it, so I don't know which tune people here know. Shoshanat Yaakov. Oh, no, that's an Israeli one. There are many tunes. Any case, it is the paradigmatic song that people sing, not in Gan, not in like kindergarten, but that people sing at their Suda. And it says that we should we should turn things over, and that we shouldn't be able to discern between cursed is Haman and blessed is
Mordechai?
Mordechai. We shouldn't discern between cursed is Zeresh, blessed is
Esther?
Yes. Well done. Don't doubt yourself so much, Elaine. You got it. So the way to not discern is if you dress up. So it kind of flows into a lot of the themes of Megillat Esther. It goes into the hiddenness. Esther means it's supposed to be Ishtar, but in Hebrew, it comes from the word lahastir, which means to hide or hidden. So it's part of that. There are many reasons why costumes make sense, but I love this idea. Elaine, why you were saying is that it became more prevalent because of Mardi Gras, because of the influence of the surrounding culture.
Yeah, just like Hanukkah. Yeah.
Why is it like Hanukkah? What do you mean? Oh,
Well,
that we give presents?
It's about the same time as Christmas, so we make a big deal about it. And give presents, but Purim maybe became popular because of the presence of Mardi Gras or the costumes,
Right, exactly. The frivolous kind of celebration. Estelle had asked last week, and I slightly misunderstood her. She said she didn't think Hanukkah was a thing at all till 100 years ago, but what she meant was that it wasn't as big a deal, I think, and that also there was a flip between the miracles of Hanukkah I think that's what you were asking, like the emphasis on the miracle of the oil versus the emphasis on the mightiness of the Maccabim. Is that what you were asking?
Absolutely.
So you should just know, I know we did speak about Hanukkah last week. So let me try to finish that, to close that a little bit, not completely. It's actually much more ancient than that. And there's a wonderful question in the Gemara, Mai Hanukkah. Mai is actually an Aramaic word, but it means, oh, hi, Ellen, yay. And hi, Robert. It means Mahi Hanukkah. It's the same thing as saying it in Hebrew. What is Hanukkah? Now, what does that question mean? What is the essence of Hanukkah? And there is a tension over the millennia about whether it's about the emphasis on the miracle of the oil or the emphasis on the miracle of the Maccabim or both? Because in Al Hanisim, which is what we add to benching and Shmona Esrei, there's nothing about the miracle of the oil. Nothing. It's all about the miracle of the strong, the weak versus the strong, the few versus the many. Nothing about, and yet we're taught in a lot of our songs, and we light the Chanukiah, and the Chanukiah is about the miracle of the oil. Not just that, but remember the question I had at the end of last week, and I said I'm going to give a shiur on it, Bezrat Hashem, next year. The famous question of the Beit Yosef: why do we celebrate 8 days of Hanukkah if the miracle of the oil was only 7 days, because it was enough for 1 day, right? And I said, don't answer the question. But one of the answers is that the first day we're celebrating the miracle of the mighty warriors. So that's just, the conquering the weak over the strong and the few over the many. I'm going to talk all about this next year. Sorry that you'll have to wait a little bit for that. But there's a tension all the time. Now, I think the tension is gorgeous because it actually keeps going back and forth and showing us this is important, this is important, this is important, this is important. And I think we'll have a discussion on it next year. I think that would be amazing. I'm actually going to write down in my notes, Estelle, your question, because maybe before the class that I'll give, I will research, because I have an article, I actually read an article on it this year. And if I find it, I'll send it to you, about how it changed over time. It's beautiful articles. And I misunderstood your question. The question is actually very relevant and very poignant, because it's like we all have that question. Wait a minute. Is it about the oil? Is it about the victory? Is it about the oil? Is it about the victory? Is it about the oil? Is it about the victory? So it's about both, but different ones were elevated at different times. But we always celebrated Hanukkah. And my Hanukkah is a great name for the thing, although actually I want to talk about that question about why we like for 8 days and not for 7. But there's so much to talk about Hanukkah. So thank you. I hope that gave you part of an answer at least.
Yes, part, and thank you very much. I'm looking forward to it.
And I'm so happy that you brought it up, because it does happen that so many things happen, and then something falls off my radar. And if you don't come back to me and say, I asked you a question, could you please answer it? I might forget. So I actually appreciate when I'm called out on that. So thank you for doing that. Okay, so that's Hanukkah. And now let's go to Purim, which is the next rabbinic
I have
holiday.
a suggestion, Rabbi Bracha.
Yeah.
As a bridge between our class on Megillah and the Tehillim, how's if we would learn Mizbar Shir Hanukkah Habayit?
Oh, that's Hanukkah, not
Right.
Purim.
Right, exactly. Oh,
Why
that's
would
right.
that be a bridge? That wouldn't be a bridge between Purim. I thought you meant the
Right.
one that's
You're right.
Ayelet Shachar, which is about Esther. But
Okay.
people don't know that one so much. But yes, let me put that. Which one is that, by the way? What number is it? Do you
I
remember?
think that's 30, if I'm not mistaken.
Great. So you know what? Right when you write me the email, Judy, add that as well. Oh, I'm so excited. This is going to be awesome. Okay. But we're focusing on the Megillah. And I'm
Right.
excited about Tehillim in a few weeks when we start that. Okay. I hope it'll be interesting. I haven't learned them yet, but I hope it will be interesting. All right. So what happened until now? We ended chapter 8, right? We ended chapter 8 last time. That's what I remember. That Ubachon Medina Umdina, and in every one of the 127 states or provinces, Ubachol Ir Va'ir, and in every city, Makom Asher Devar HaMelech V'dato Magia, any place that the word of the king and his, that is religion, but it can also mean his edicts, Magia reaches, Simcha V'sason La Yehudim, joy. Remember we said this is, I don't know if you remember, but at the end of last week, we said, this is the opposite of Evel and Tzom Ubechi. It used to be that it was mourning and fasting and crying and wailing when the first edict came out. But now it's the opposite. And if there was Tzom, fasting, Mishteh Yom Tov. Now it's a feast and Yom Tov.
You've got mail.
You got mail? No, that was somebody who was speaking. Lance, you can put yourself on mute.
Yes, sorry.
It just turned cold here. Hold on 1 second. I'm 56 degrees in my house because where I'm living, because the heating is broken. Give me a second. I'm going to move a little closer to the heater here. I figured I'm so cold in my house. At least I should be warm and chill. All right. Okay, I'm back. All right. Rabim, many me'amei ha'aretz, that's what I said to you, for mit yahadim, are either acting Jewish or becoming Jewish. Why? Ki nafal pachad ha'yehudim aleihem. Because the fear, literally fear, of the Jews fell on them. Now, why? First of all, I have a few things to say before we go to chapter 9. Why are they so scared of the Jews? Any thoughts about that? We talked about it a little bit. I'd like to hear yours.
Afraid of revenge?
Afraid of revenge. Say more. Revenge who, what? This is the people living in the city. This is not the house of Haman.
Well, they probably knew about the edict of Haman, and the Jews
They
knew
did.
about, and the Jews knew about the edict of Haman. So the Jews weren't happy about that. So it might have been a human reaction to feel vengeful. For the
But
for
why were they scared? How many Jews do you think there were compared to non-Jews?
Many.
I'm discussing with you, Judy. I'm not pushing back. I'm appreciating.
I don't know.
Well, what do we imagine? Do we imagine they were many
just-
or not many?
I'm just reminded by in the first sentence in Shemos, or one of the the beginnings in Shemot, it talks about how the at least Paro got the people to be afraid, in quotes, of the Jews, and it said because they were more numerous than us, and so on and so
They
forth.
will become, oh, because they became numerous.
Right.
Okay, got it. And because things have flipped and Mordechai is now second in command, I think maybe that's what you're saying. So they were thinking that now Mordechai has the power to make them vengeful. Okay, I think that's what you're saying.
Yes, right.
Okay, any other thoughts? Okay. So that's one thing I wanted to say, because that's going to play into the next chapter. Now, I want you to notice that I'm teaching a class. Thank you. The Yom Tov. What is a Yom Tov?
A chag, like Pesach, Shavuot, Sukkot.
Exactly. And Rosh Hashanah usually, but usually what happens on a Yom Tov? What differentiates Yom Tov from a regular weekday?
Just like Shabbos, you don't do malacha.
Well, a little different. You don't do creative work, but there's a little difference.
And you also have oneg, pleasure.
It's not exactly oneg, it's more simcha, I think. I think oneg is more associated with Shabbat, but this is simcha. So in order to enjoy the Yom Tov, we're allowed to do what?
Cook.
Have holiday food.
What food?
Holiday food.
Holiday food, yes, but what we're allowed to do on Yom Tov is cook the food or bake the food. If your oven is on, you can make fresh chocolate chip cookies, but the oven has to be on. You can't turn it on. You're not allowed to create fire or turn off fire, but you're allowed to, if you have like a yahrzeit candle, you can pass fire. In Hebrew, it's beautiful. For those who know Hebrew, you just flip two letters. Lehavir esh means to light a fire. Lehavir esh means to pass a fire. It's really sweet. It's like you're allowed to lehavir esh. So you could cook and bake and heat things up. You can have soup. You can't have soup on Shabbat during the day unless it was in a crock pot or on the blech all night. But on Chag, you're allowed to, in order to have this extra, because, you know, joy is associated with food. We actually have a fast day this week, not a happy day. And when it's right before Shabbat, it's so hard, but whatever. We'll put that aside for now. Okay. So it's unusual that they're using the term Yom Tov. And guess what? It turns out, and we're going to learn this in the next perek, the first Purim that they celebrated, it was a Yom Tov. They made it like Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot. They made it a Yom Tov because It was they decreed it should be, otherwise it doesn't make sense to use the word Yom Tov, because Yom Tov is a halachic term. You just said it yourself. The halachic term of Yom Tov, meaning it's a day when you're not allowed to do creative work except cooking and baking, except using fire, right? Using fire, not creating. Everybody with me?
Yes.
Great. Now let's go to chapter 9. Just taking out my notes. Okay. First one. By the way, where were we in the date? When do you remember when this happened? We were, if you remember, let me just see if I can find it. Here it is. Look on chapter 8, verse 9. What does it say? Where were we? On the calendar I'm talking about. Chapter 8, verse 9.
Chodesh Hashlishi hu Chodesh Sivan.
Sivan is when Shavuot is. Is that close to Purim?
No, it's on the other side of the calendar.
It's
No.
kind of on the other side of the calendar, approximately half a year away or 8 months away, something like that. And now let's look at the first verse in chapter 9. Uvishneim asar chodesh, in the 12th month. The 12th month, it's always the month before Pesach, because this goes according to biblical. Remember, we said the first month in the Torah is Nisan. Why? Why isn't it Tishrei, Rosh Hashanah? Who remembers? Because Rosh Hashanah Tishrei is the birthday of the world, but Nisan is the birthday of the Jewish nation, because that's when God took us out of Egypt and created a nation. So the first month in the Torah, or biblical, this is considered part of biblical, is Nisan. Therefore, the 12th month is Purim, Adar. Everybody with me? Just
Yes.
make sure we're together. Okay. On the 12th month, Chodesh Adar, Bishlosha Asar Bo, on the 13th day, so, okay, when the edict of the king came out, it was the day when the enemies of the Jews had hoped to have power over them. What is hafuch? Hafuch is
Upside down.
upside down or opposite. By the way, do anybody here know what cafe hafuch is? Cafe
Yes.
is coffee. What's cafe hafuch, Judy?
When you put in steamed milk into it and your coffee.
When it's a latte, when it's made on milk and not on water, right? That's cafe hafuch. It's the opposite. Just giving you a little tidbit of modern Hebrew. So v'nahafachu, and everything turns upside down. Asher yishletu haYehudim heima b'sonehem. That the Jews will now rule over their enemies. Their enemies are considered anti-Semitic people. Enemies are people who were happy to receive the edict from the king through Haman. Remember, Haman's the one who put it out, Haman, that they should kill the Jews. They were given literally a green light to just literally slaughter Jews, a pogrom, just slaughter them. And the difference between Purim and Hanukkah, I think we said last week. I think we said it. Was it last week or 2 weeks? I think it was last week. What was the difference? Oh yeah, last week was the last day of Hanukkah almost. It feels like such a long time ago. No, it was 2 weeks ago. I can't remember. Remind me, people. I can't remember what day it was. And any, yeah. It was
For
last.
Purim, they were out to get us physically. And in the times of the Greeks, they were out to eradicate our belief.
Right. Spiritually eradicate. Great. So here they were allowed to, people were willing to, can you imagine, even if you got an edict, let's say chas v'chalila, we got an edict from, I don't know, the US government that on this and this day, you can just kill, I don't know, let's say, I'm trying to think, I don't want to pick a nation. I don't know, all the people from Bolivia, not true, but just randomly. So like, can you imagine doing that just randomly? If you know you're a person's from Bolivia, you would kill them. Even if you had a green light, you'd have to hate all Bolivians to do that. So that's why we can understand that like there was no reason given. It was just, you can kill them. Any Jew, you can kill any Jew, any Jew. And according to that, it seemed like the Jews were not allowed to fight back, which seems very odd to me. I mean, how can you tell somebody not to fight back? What are you going to do to them? Kill them? They were going to get killed anyways. Like, what's the issue? It's hard to understand how that could happen. Maybe in those times it was, I don't know. But we do know, sadly, that there are countries where people literally just kill anybody who's of a different religion. Okay. So I want to mention that this is from Sivan, we skipped 6 months or 8 months. What happened, do you think, in those 6 to 8 months? Any thought? Remember what happened? They hurried up the edict. They hurried up the special riders, the special people who sent out. They had a huge post office room where they would write up edicts and send them out. And we learned in the last chapter that they hurried up to send out the edict that the Jews are allowed to fight back. That's what Esther and Mordechai sent out because the king said, I cannot rescind my original. So what do you think happened in those 6 to 8 months, guys?
The Jews armed themselves, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. The Jews, like, it makes sense. Remember, we were talking about that God's name is hidden. So we don't see God's hand overtly, but by giving them 6 to 8 months, they had an opportunity to arm themselves, acquire firearms, get themselves ready. I mean, you can imagine it was a very tense and hard time, not knowing if you'd live through it. Like, they may have thought that God was on their side, but how do you actually know until the battle happens? So I'm imagining, that's not written in the Megillah. I'm imagining with you those 6 months, knowing that your neighbors hate you. And because not that much time has happened between the original edict and Haman being killed. That was only a couple of months. Remember, it was Pesach was the 3-day fast. And then the 2 parties that Esther made for Haman and Mordechai, then he was hanged. And then they very, very quickly, Ahasuerus instated Mordechai instead of Haman, and he became second to the king. And he said, the queen, you can do whatever you want, like put out whatever edict you want. That happened really, really, really quickly. And I imagine, but now they have a long time to kind of absorb and digest what's happening. And I'm just thinking what it might be like if you know that in 6, 7 months, there's going to be a day of a pogrom and you get yourself ready. Marvin, I'm thinking you might have something to say about this. I don't know why. Do you have something to say about this? I feel like with your interest in history, what does it feel like to have those 6 to 8 months to get ready and knowing the people around you? Oh, Marvin might be frozen. Marvin, you're frozen. Unfreeze. Okay, if you have something to say, please let me know. I'm just like, that's not a common thing. You have 6 months to get yourself ready to protect yourselves. And you know exactly the date it's going to happen. Anybody have any thoughts about what that might have felt like? Or
I don't quite understand.
yeah.
That I admit complete ignorance, but why these 6 months? I mean, why were they given this time?
Well, the original edict was, Marvin will come back. The original edict was that on the 13th day of Adar, Haman put out an edict. Remember, he pilpur. He did a lottery. He picked which month,
Absolutely.
and the lottery picked which date. But this was sent out a year ahead of time. And as soon as it went out, Mordechai came to Esther and said, hey, we got to do something about this. Remember, sackcloth, all the Jews are mourning. They're going to get killed in a year, completely eradicated. And then things happened very, very, very quickly. Esther stepped into the fray and was willing to put her life on the line and actually save the Jews, saved herself, saved the Jews, saved her family.
I see. I'm sorry.
It's okay. Well, you weren't with us the whole time, so I get that. So now it's already done. We're 2 months after, or 3. What second? We're Adar. Oh, it was Pesach, so it's like 2 to 3 months. And now the king said, I can't rescind the edict. So it's still going to happen on the 13th of Adar. So now the new edict. So maybe that's why Mordechai and Esther put it out so quickly. First of all, to give the Jews hope and to give them time to arm themselves. I'm just thinking of that 6 to 8 months being in limbo like that, what that might have felt like you're actually given, like the partisans, imagining somebody giving them actually an opportunity to arm themselves and fight back like that. That's just what comes to mind for me. So I think that's something we don't usually think about because most of the time we don't look at what the timeline is in the Megillah. It kind of feels like, oh, everything happened one after the other. That's not true. It took a long time till it all happened. Okay. I think it's time to go to the next pasuk. Let me see. Oh, so Rashi points out, sorry, on the first pasuk, remember it's v'nafoch. Anybody know the song v'nahafoch, 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 v'nahafoch? And sound familiar? That comes from the Megillah. V'nafochu means it's become like one word, v'nafochu, but it's really two words. V'nahafochu. Oh, Marvin, you're back. I don't know if you heard when I said something to you. Did you hear? You have to unmute.
No,
So I'll tell what I was
I just
talking.
zoomed out.
Yeah. No, we saw you were frozen. What I said was, and it's unusual, but from Sivan all the way around to Adar, the Jews got the new edict saying you will be able to protect yourself and defend yourselves. And what might that have felt like to have those 6 to 8 months of limbo when you're going to arm yourself and you're going to prepare yourself to defend yourself. So I can imagine that they were fearful but hopeful. And I feel like that's not something like I imagine the partisans in the Shoah. Like if somebody had said, here, you can arm yourselves, you're going to have 6 months and then you're going to have a battle, what that might have felt like. Like it feels like there's a chance that wasn't given to them before. That's all. I was wondering if you had any thoughts about that.
Well, let me think about it.
Okay, you can think about it now that you're back with us. Okay.
Did Rabbi Bracha, did any of them think about, or do we know that is it recorded leaving, emigrating, running
No,
away?
that's such a good question. Achashverosh ruled over such a large portion of the known world, 127 provinces. And we learned at the beginning, I think the Gra, the Vilna Gaon said that 118 did not listen to him. So I don't know that the people had so many places they could run to. It's not like today where the world is smaller. You
Right.
could reach places. So, and in 6 months or in 5, like maybe, but no, I don't think we actually have any record, or I don't know of it. That doesn't mean anything. I'm not a historian. So I think that's a good question. Okay. Rashi says, v'nahafochu, and things were turned topsy-turvy. So he gives a few suggestions. So I would like to ask you, what are the different ways that there was v'nahafochu? Be specific. From the beginning of the Megillah.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Were the Jews supposed to wait when the day came for them to be attacked, or would they attack first?
We'll learn about what happened in the Megillah, but originally the edict was they should just lie down and be killed. That's what it sounded like. Like really, like he had to put out a second edict saying that the Jews can fight. What does that mean?
But to fight back or to fight ahead?
That's a good question. Let me look back at the edict. Just a minute. Let's look at what it exactly said. That's a great question. 1 second.
What parak and pasuk?
I don't know. I'm looking. Chapter 8. Okay. In verse 8, Achashverosh says, write according to the Jews as it is good in your eyes. Now, so let's look at 9. He wrote to everybody, okay. And he wrote in the name of a king Achashverosh, blah, blah, blah. That 11, let's look at 8 verse 11, that the king had granted to the Jews who were in every city the right to assemble and to defend themselves. So that's one part of it, Estelle. But also to destroy, to slay, and to exterminate all the military strength of the people in province that would assault them. Little ones.
In other words, they're still on the defensive.
Yes, it does seem like that, which is good. We don't want Jews going out and proactively killing people.
Good idea.
Which one's a good idea? To proactively kill?
Every once in a while, you wonder about
Every
it.
once in a while, yeah. And by the way, I want to remind you that in chapter 8, verse 11, it says that the king Achashverosh via Mordechai and Esther said, and you can take spoils for yourself. But we're going to find out in this chapter that they didn't do that. Just saying. Okay. Where were we? Okay. What was v'nafochu? From what to what? Examples.
Well, the obvious is that it went from the Jews being killed and one edict to another edict, which were completely opposite.
Great. So one edict, the second edict isn't exactly the opposite, right? It didn't eradicate the first one, but it's the opposite of them being victims, now they're allowed to be what? Protagonists, defenders, military. So the edict, certainly. And also, what did you say first, though? Not just the edict, also that it's a day of rejoicing. I don't remember if you said that. So the 13th of Adar was supposed to be a really hard day. If we believe that there's, I mean, some people believe that the fact, what do we call the day? What do we call the holiday?
Purim.
Purim. Why is it called Purim?
Is pour the lottery? Is that what it
Or
is?
is the lottery? Why should it be called Purim? Why is the lottery so important? That's an interesting question, right? I learned it when I was preparing for this chapter. What is so important about the lottery? Do we believe in lotteries? Do we believe that there's luck in lotteries? Like, I mean, you could say that was the initiator of the whole story. Like that would be one way, right? Because he picked that day and that day was supposed to be a sad day and then everything got turned around. So that's one way of saying it. But that's not the beginning of the story. The beginning of the story is that the Jews attended Ahasuerus's feast and whatever, and that Mordechai didn't bow down and Haman got it right. Why? It's a really interesting question. Why? Because one of the nafochos is that the day that was supposed to be such a hard, terrible day for the Jews became a day of Yom Tov and Simcha and happiness. And that's high. So there is a teaching, at least then, that there is another layer of, I wouldn't call it witchcraft, a little bit of magic or luck, like luck actually is an entity. And the fact that Haman randomly chose Adar and randomly chose the 13th day, that actually was a hard day. The same way we say that Tisha B'Av is a hard day for the Jews and so many bad things happen on Tisha B'Av. And we know that many, many, many bad things happen on the 9th of Av. We know that. And that the 9 days are considered a time of bad luck for the Jews. Like, do we believe in that? I mean, some of us believe in that. And we don't do transactions if we can help it during the 9 days. We don't go on hard hikes. We don't go swimming. And part of going swimming is the pleasure. Like if you need it for health, you can do it. Part of it was that swimming used to be only in the ocean or in rivers, and that can be dangerous and people could drown. So there is a teaching in Judaism of luck, and that is the poor. And that the poor that, not poor in English, but poor in Hebrew, and Purim were two. Why? Because he picked both the month and the day of the month. That's why it's two Purim. That is the essence of the opposite, that was supposed to be a terrible day for the Jews. And it ended up being an amazing day. Why did it change? What was the instigator, not the person, but what was the act that made it change, if we believe that this was ordained?
The change of heart of the king, that he
Yes, the king, but which king, God or Ahasuerus?
no, Ahasuerus.
But why? Yes, but why would God allow it to change? If we believe that this is from God, behind the scenes, yeah, that's the act. You're right. That's what physically happened, was that Ahasuerus allowed them. But why would it change if we're looking at it from the Jewish perspective? Not how did it happen? Who was the one? Like Paro's the one who brought the Jew, who put them into slavery in Egypt. But God had already ordained that we would be in slavery in Egypt. But Paro was the act. Yes, Ellen, just unmute. Yep.
It was the fact that Esther put her belief in God when
Yes.
she went in front of the king.
Great. And I want to roll that back a teeny bit. What did she ask from the Jews before she did that?
To fast.
To fast. And they all fasted as a community. They fasted for 3 days. Thank God we don't have 3 days. So that, you're right, that is representative, Ellen, of the tshuva, the repentance that the Jews did, whatever the repentance was for. Some say it was for eating non-kosher food, drinking non-kosher wine, becoming like the non-Jews. What are they repenting for? So that's the first chapter where the Jews were part of those who were invited, and they were not following the laws of Judaism. They were not following God's laws. And the act of the 3 days is actually a crux of it. It's actually a pivotal moment, not in the Megillah as a physical act, but more as a spiritual act.
Why is that?
Yeah, Ellen.
Why are you talking about it as if it's a repentance. Maybe it was the spiritual act of the same spiritual act that Esther had, which is I'm placing my faith in God,
I agree.
period.
I agree.
I
It
mean,
could be
not
that as well.
because I made idols or I ate non-kosher food or I don't know, I consorted
Just
with,
reaffirming belief. Hold
yeah,
that thought. It's in this chapter. Excellent. Well done. I was connecting it to the poor, the Purim. Why are we calling it Purim? If we believe that it was supposed to be a hard day for the Jews, why did God decree that that should be a hard day for the Jews and needed Esther to save the Jews? That's what I was talking about, that you could look at it as a thread of God decreed because the Jews were not following God's commands, and therefore they needed to do tshuva, to do repentance. But there are different ways of looking at it. It's just so unusual to use Purim. Like, we think it's normal because that's what we call it. But why use, like, Hanukkah is about the rededication of the temple, not about the Syrian Greeks killing us or, whatever they did to us. And yet Purim is about Haman picking those lots. Why? Unless somebody believed that there was actually the hands of God in that, and that God really had intended for it to be a hard day. And it's a big deal that that day is now a happy day. Food for thought. Food for thought. Happy to hear pushback.
what the fasting did, you said it before, is that it brought the community together.
Yes, I agree. And they're willing to fast for 3 days. Yeah.
And that's the important thing,
Oh, that's nice. I like that.
that they're finally acting together. A
Yeah.
lottery pits one person against another.
What was the first word?
A lottery pits one
Lot.
person against each other,
Nice.
against
Nice.
another.
Nice commentary on that.
Whereas
Beautiful.
this brought them all together.
That is so beautiful. I love that. And I also want, 1 second, Judy. I also want to remind you, Judy, we don't see you, that I also want to remind you that Haman said to Ahasuerus, there is a nation that is spread out all across your 127 provinces. But somehow, now it could be that Esther only got the people in Shushan together. That is possible as well, because it doesn't say she sent it out by messenger. But whatever it was, she managed to pull them together. I love that. That is a great way of understanding it, that the act of the fast, if everybody was willing to do the fast, then they believed that the act of fasting and coming together would kind of reach God's ears, if you could look at it that way, as a community. Yeah, Judy.
Do we have any history about the Jews being just the opposite of being a cohesive group? And that she said, Lech Knosset Kol HaYehudim, as an antidote for their being like Sinat Chinam.
You mean like the second temple that was destroyed by, yeah. I think what the question that's coming up here, which I don't have a good answer to, not right this second, what was the Jews, what was their big sin that they were deserving at the time of?
Maybe they were just living in Persia and they weren't back in, the land, the Holy Land.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they did afterwards. It was Esther's son Daryavush that we believe is the one who allowed them to go back to Israel and create a second temple.
Oh,
And build a second temple. That's what we think is, that's what we learn, even though it's not written specifically. Maybe it's somewhere in Chronicles. I'd have to look that up. I think that's a great question. Right. I think we're hovering around the issue. And Judy's asking if we have, I don't know, if we have historical knowledge of that. I think that's another way of reading the Megillah. And I actually have a book by Benny Lau, but I don't know if I have time to read it all. That might give the answer to that.
A book about Purim by Benny Lau?
I don't know if it's about Purim. Yes, it is about Purim. Yes, it is. And it's about the geopolitical, historical. Yes. Yeah. I think you should. Yeah, that would be really interesting to learn on that other year when we learn about Melech versus Melech Achashverosh. In a few years, when we're willing to revisit the Megillah, maybe we'll do that too. Okay. I don't have a better answer, but I appreciate the discussion very, very much. Let's continue. So that was, oh, we just still didn't say. So let me give you what the nafochu. There was Vashti was queen and Esther becomes queen. Haman is second in command to the king. Mordechai becomes second in command to the king. The Jews are supposed to be lie down and be killed. The Jews are not only allowed to defend themselves, but they actually, and to kill non-Jews who are attacking them, but they do it. And the day, the 13th of Adar, was switched from being a day of unhappiness and desolation to one of joy and rejoicing. So those are at least 4 things that are v'nafochu, okay? All right, verse 2. Well, we have 10 minutes left. We only got to verse 2. So it might take a couple more times till we finish the Megillah. Nikalu hayudim ba'arehem. So this goes back to what people have mentioned here, that it might be about joining together as a community. Kahal is a community or assembly. So nikalu hayudim ba'arehem. The Yehudim, the Jews, gathered together in their cities, in all of the provinces of the king Achashverosh. Why? On that day, remember, we're on the third. Okay, the scene. It's like if you saw it as a movie, it would be like fast forward now. The second edict came out. Mordechai, people are becoming Jewish or acting Jewish. They're all scared of the Jews. And somehow you'd fast forward. I don't know how the movie would do that. Maybe it would fast forward through some scenes of the Jews getting arms and training themselves, right? That could be, and practicing. And I don't know, seeing them go from a meek, bowed nation to one which has hope and stands straight and with pride or not with pride is the right word, with strength and hope that they could be successful, that they see already the hands of God, and now they're hoping it'll continue so they don't get decimated and killed on the 13th of Adar. And we fast forward. Now we're on the 13th of Adar. Here's the scene. So they gather together lishloach yad, in order to stretch out their hand. That's what the word means. B'mevakshei ra'atam, those who desire of evil of them or injury of them. Ve'ish lo amad lifnehem, no man was able to stand before them. Now, this is a verse that we read 2 different ways, lifnehem or bifnehem. Doesn't make such a big difference. I'm not sure why we need to repeat it, except you have to hear every syllable and every letter in the Megillah to fulfill the mitzvah. So we have a controversy about whether it's lifnehem or bifnehem. Trying to see if there's any difference in the English. Ish lo amad, before them. Li is to or before. Bifnehem is with them. I'm not sure if there's a big difference. Why? Ki nafal pachdam al kol ha'amim. Because the fear of the Jews fell on all the nations. We just said that 2 verses ago, meaning that fear has remained. Now, let me see what I wrote here. Basically, it's things that I've said already, that Achashverosh gave them permission to fight back and to gather between the Jews and all those anti-Semites who wanted to kill them. They were vastly outnumbered. The non-Jews must have been well armed, 127 provinces. By all rights, what should have happened, even giving them the right to defend themselves, they still probably should have been killed, I would imagine. But no one was able to stand before the Jews. This pasuk, this verse, hints at something miraculous. How could it be that the Jews won? It's similar in that sense, in a way, to Hanukkah, where we said that the few were outnumbered, but they defeated the many. The weak defeated the strong. I think there's like a nice little connection here between Purim and Hanukkah. I don't know, Estelle, maybe we can work on that for next year. We didn't even discuss that, by the way, when we said last on the Hanukkah class, which is the Hanukkah class about, the differences and the same between Hanukkah and Purim. Okay. Anybody have a thought about verse 2, or should we continue? Yeah, Judy.
Yeah.
Judy, come back. You're muted and off camera. Come back. Wait, you're muted. Wait, you're muted.
Was it supposedly God decided that he liked the Jews this time and he wanted to have them win.
That would be real.
They came back into God's favor.
Yes, exactly. They came back into God's favor. That's the nafochu, that everything got flipped. And the question that we had was, why did they fall out of God's favor? And what was the pivotal thing that made them fall into God's favor? So we heard maybe it's about, which is beautiful. I heard three answers. One is about maybe the fasting and repentance, which is what's usually quoted. Another one is that they gathered together, which maybe they were not before. And the third one was that they showed the way Esther modeled it by believing in God and willing to stand up to Ahasuerus, or to take her chances, that they showed that they actually believed that God would save them. Yeah, Judy, you wanted to say something? You have to unmute. No, you have to unmute. Just don't go off camera, just unmute. Okay, when you unmute, you're not unmuted. It's still red. Oh, you know what? Let me help you. There's a way I can ask you to unmute. How's that? No, you're talking, but oh, there you go.
Yeah, just going to say it just echoes of today's times with October 7th, and now everything in Mir Hashem will be Nahafoch.
Yeah, the main difference is that
Yeah,
didn't
we
die.
don't know how it's going to come out.
We don't know how it's going to end up.
Right.
And many Jews have died. Many.
Right.
Just this week, 6 people were killed.
Right.
3 soldiers, 1 off-duty police officer, 2 women, 1 in her 60s, 1 in her 70s, just because Arabs opened fire on the bus. And believe me, this is between 2 little towns that people live in.
Right.
I know people in
Yeah.
all those towns. So so that's a big difference, Judy. Halavai, Bezrat Hashem, but we can't bring back those who were killed, and there's 12,000 wounded. Some of them very, very seriously. We don't even know the extent. We're not aware, unless you have somebody in your family or friend, we don't realize the absolute extent of the wounded. Like the one person who was so wounded that he died a year later, and he was in intensive care that whole year. I mean, those are stories that we don't know about all of them. So that's the hard part for me.
Well,
Yay, let's try to finish on a more uplifting note.
I learned something this past Shabbos
Yeah.
from Rabbi Benoff, the assistant rabbi at the RJC. He said that in previous times, the 8th, 9th, and 10th were all fast days.
Wait, that's Tevet, that's Rabbi Tevet.
Right. Yes,
That's uplifting?
No. Well, the fact that right now we only have the one day to fast is uplifting. I mean, I prefer to fast only one day rather than today, tomorrow, and Friday.
Right. 8, 9, and 10, the things that happened are rolled into one. So you know what? We're going to stop at verse 2. Let me just make a mark for myself, and we will continue. I just really appreciated the conversation today. Thank you so much, everybody, for bringing in your thoughts, your answers, your questions. And I want to say a moment about Asara B'Tevet. One of the special things about Asara B'Tevet, and not the 10th of Tevet, yes, it is 3 fast days rolled into one. You can look that up if you want. We have guidelines of how to keep it if you're able to fast. But it's the only fast day that we fast on a Friday. Anita, stare if it falls on a Friday. I don't know if it does. You can't fast. Which one? Shivas, I can't remember which ones can fall on a Friday, but it's the only one that we fast. Like, how unusual is it to fast on Erev Shabbat? But if you're cooking food, you're allowed to taste the food and spit it out. So it'll taste good on Shabbat. Lance, you want to say something quick? You're muted. You're muted. You're muted.
If you look at my chat, you'll see my case for prejudice against me personally as a company.
Okay, fine. Okay, you can send it to me also because it's hard for
I
me.
will.
Thank
And
you.
the other point, one more important point, which is absolutely critical, that is, Joseph says to his brothers, you really sold me up the river, and don't worry about it, because what you did was consistent with God's plan.
Beautiful.
Now,
Beautiful. Wait, is there more?
Yes, there's more. You're not going to like this. If October 7th hadn't happened, Sinwar wouldn't have been killed, Nasrallah wouldn't have been killed, Haniah would have been killed, the pagers wouldn't have happened, there was a factory, an Iranian factory in Syria.
Whoa, we're not going further than that. I heard, we get the idea. You're saying that there were some good things that came out of it. Is that what I'm hearing?
Major good things.
Okay,
The whole world
Appreciating that.
is changed.
appreciating that. Thank you. Robert, do you have something else to say?
Rabbi Weiss's class yesterday, an
Yeah.
interesting point. He pointed out that Yosef's first statement to his questioning his brothers was, is my father still alive? And then a sentence later, he says, is our father still alive? Which is quite an amazing difference.
Beautiful. And I'll
Yeah.
add one more thought. That was my Kavanah Friday. Yes, Estelle, what?
I have a thought. You know, can't it just be that people themselves have afterwards free will, and we ourselves as people, as Jews, help each other and have the right also to disagree with each other? Why do we attribute everything to what God wants us to do? That's taking away our free will.
That's a great way to end the class. And that's a thoughtful question. Can you bring it up next class so we can talk about it?
I'll write it down. Sorry.
Down Estelle.
I think maybe we could spend a few minutes talking about that, because why, maybe what Estelle is asking also, why are we looking for God's hand in the?
Yes, that's
it's not
exactly
exact-
what I'm asking.
It's not exactly the topic of Megillat Esther and anti-Semites, but I think it might be worth having a discussion, because thoughtful discussions, especially this group is very thoughtful, are just either deepen or allow us to think about different ways of what it means to be Jewish, to believe in God, and how much is God part of our lives. And I think different Jewish people feel differently about God's hand in our lives. So I think that's a great question. Why are we looking? I love that question. Why are we looking? Some people have a very easy answer to that, but maybe it's not such an easy answer. But I thank you. And I just want to add one more thought before we go, since Joseph was brought in, and I love the story of Joseph, and so much to learn every year, that when he says, Ha'od avi chai, is my father still alive? One way of understanding it is he's asking himself, is my father still alive in me enough that I feel connected to the family? Or have I been so assimilated?
It's an interesting.
And his
That's
answer
a good
would be actually nicely, Robert, what Rav Avi said. Because if the next time he says, our father, that's a beautiful way to add to that Dvar Torah.
Right.
Nice. Love you guys. This is a great, I'm so energized when I learn with you. Bezrat Hashem. And I want to tell you already, I think for Tu B'Shvat, which is next month, I'll give a one-off on Tu B'Shvat.
Okay.
Why not?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye, everybody. Have a great
Bye.
day.
You
Bye.
too.